Hey, welcome back for another Python tutorial, and today we're going to be learning about integers and strings. So let's get right back into the Python idle, which lets us do programming in the simplest way. Further down in the tutorials, we'll be using something else, but right now this is a really good way just to get your feet wet and to start seeing some Python code and understanding some of the basics. Today I'm going to be teaching you a bit more about variables. Last time we learned that you can store information inside a variable, and we use the favorite song to store a string like this. Favorite song equals Anna's Sun by Walk the Moon. And now this string, a string just means text. Anything inside of these quotations is a string. So you've got this string, which is the song, and we were storing it inside of this variable favorite song. But you can also store numbers. So let's say if we have a favorite number, then we can go ahead and store something like 5 in it. And we're not going to be using these quotation marks. And if we run that, it works. We've stored 5 as the favorite number. And this is what you call an integer. And you can do all sorts of stuff with this. So let's say favorite number equals 5, and we say print, and we put in favorite number, then it's just going to return 5. But if we go a little bit um, bigger again, we can even add things to it. So let's say we add favorite number and 5, then we should get 10 returned because 5, which is stored in here, plus 5 comes out to be 10. One thing you have to be really careful about when you're using programming languages is the order of operations. So if I go ahead and do print 2 plus 5 times 3, then what it's going to do is first it's going to do the multiplication or division, and then next it'll do the addition and subtraction. So if we did a problem like this, it would go ahead and come out to 17 because it does 5 times 3, which is 15, and then adds 2 to that answer. If we wanted to add the 2 and the 5 first, we can do that by adding in some more parentheses. We can add them here, and that would just make it do the 2 plus 5 first, and then times that result by 3, which gives us 21. So that's kind of how this works, and it's something to keep in mind. Um, it's okay to use as many of these as you would like to if you're not as sure about what is going to happen first. I could even run this again if I wasn't sure about my operations, and I could run this if I wanted 5 times 3 done first, and it doesn't really make a difference. This looks a little bit cleaner, but this might help with your readability. So it's a trade-off, and you can decide what works best for you when you're programming. Next up, I want to show you a little bit more. You can use, let's say I have some fish in my house. Let's say I have 12 fish, and I've got dogs in my house. Let's say I've only got, 2 dogs. Then I can make a new variable called my animals, and I'll just make it equal to my fish plus my dogs. And you can store that in here. And if we ever want to figure out, okay, well, how many animals do I have? You can just go ahead and print out that variable like that. And it tells us that there's 14, which is the fish, plus the dogs. And that's kind of showing you how flexible these variables can be. And it looks a lot cleaner because I can understand, okay, this 14 is talking about animals, and it's not as abstract as numbers. You now have words to put with, what your code is saying. Something else I want to point out is that you'll get an error if you try and add a string and an integer together. So remember up here, this is a string because it's inside of quotations. Anna's Sun by Walk the Moon, stored in favorite song. So let's say we want to print favorite song, and we want to add it to my animals. Just like here, we're adding variables together. But if we run something like this, we're actually going to get an error. And you don't have to be afraid of errors. Errors just let you know that you probably typed something wrong, and this is kind of helpful. It could be a little intimidating the first time you get an error, but let's look into it just a little bit further. Here it says type error, so there's a problem here. It says you can only concatenate, and remember we learned about this in the first tutorial, which means adding one thing to another, string, not int to string. So basically, to break this down, it says that you can only add a string to a string like this, and you can't add an integer to a string. So that wasn't too bad. It's just telling me that right here, this is a integer and this is a string, and you can't add these together. It just doesn't logically work. One other place that you might find the error like this is if you store, you know, um, I'll just call this favnum, and let's say 5. This is not to be confused with something like favorite number 5, because this will be an integer, but this will be a string. The difference is in the quotations right here. So if I try and go ahead and do something like this, and I print out favorite number uh, plus, if we're adding the string and the integer, then it's not going to work. It's going to give us the exact same error as last time. So those are some things to keep in mind. You've learned about what an integer is, you've learned about what a string is, and we've started looking into errors. And I just want you to always remember that errors aren't something to be afraid of. They're actually really helpful and can point to where the problem is and help you get your code back up and running as quickly as possible. If this was helpful, go ahead and leave a like and let me know what you want to learn next. I'm going to try and put out more Python tutorials to help out. And I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.